We've been getting a lot of fun Echoes of Wisdom related news recently. And, I want to talk about one specific one in this video, but we might as well go over like a couple other ones. At the latest financial briefing, they revealed that the game has already sold. And you know how it works. Like they release a game and then you only get to account for like the first however long before the financial results come in. So like this isn't even like from then to today. This is from then until like pretty early on after release. The game has already sold 2.5 million units. So there's a fine chance that it's maybe even crossed 3 by now. I don't know, but 2.5 million units is it's a perfectly good number. I know it's a lot lower than the Link's Awakening remake, but we're seeing that a lot here at the tail end of the Switch generation. It's a little bit disappointing to see how it's kind of like demand for certain games just kind of goes down over time. You would think that as the install base grows, sales would only grow, but like for some reason it doesn't quite work that way. I mean, you can see it with like New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is just a much less appealing and interesting game overall. It's a port of an old game. Less interesting than Wonder, but like Wonder ultimately is not going to sell as well. It's still going to sell perfectly fine, but like between the two games, why would New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe sell so much more? Well, it's because it was the first 2D Mario on Switch, and it was when the Switch was really, really hyped up and there were just more people buying games for it. So now I think you're going to see that here. Link's Awakening. It's a remake of a super old game. But it's a relatively small and short game, and yet it sold really well. And then Echoes of Wisdom is a brand new 2D thing, and it's just not going to sell as well. And anyway, it's a little weird and disappointing to see it happen. But 2.5 million and counting is still perfectly good. If it's going to go on to sell 3 million units total, like they're gonna make their money back. They're gonna see that as a decent success. But then we got a lot of other info. They've still been doing interviews, and they just did an interview with BBC, and so we get a lot of fun little things in there. Apparently, at one point they did consider having Link talk in the game, but they just decided that it just didn't feel right. And I think that's fine. I think that's great. The way that they handled it in the game, I think most people thought it was actually a really interesting take on the idea. So that, it's kind of like the overall story, how they just they sort of stumbled into it, but it ended up serving the game very well. They also talked about how they purposefully made it so that you have to scroll linearly through all of the echoes. That thing that most people say is just a mark against the game. Apparently they did it on purpose because they wanted people to see the echoes, because they wanted people to be encouraged to try other echoes that they might not have considered. So they wanted people to have to scroll past them so that maybe they would see it and see something they haven't used, and it would inspire them, which I think is a really great reminder that even genius game designers can be wrong. Even entire teams of people can just be objectively wrong. I'm sorry, that's just wrong. It's the wrong conclusion. Scrolling through them all did not do anything at all to encourage me to use echoes that I did not normally use. It just didn't. It only annoyed me. It wasn't a huge annoyance. It wasn't a big problem with the game, but it was something where I'm just like, yeah, that's wrong. That's just a bad thing. They made a bad decision. So anyway, let's get to the real point of this video, which is supposed to be overall positive, although even this positive part is also going to have a caveat that probably gets people annoyed, because I know that generally I'm kind of in the minority when it comes to this game. I'm very, very mixed on the game and probably more critical than most people. Whatever, though, we'll get to that in a minute. Obviously, this is the first top-down Zelda we've seen in a really long time. And so, obviously we're wondering, like, okay, you made us wait this long. Are you going to make us wait this long again? Are we going to see more top-down Zeldas? And on that topic, Aonuma said that he initially thought that it, quote, might be close to impossible to make a new entry, adding new elements to the top-down style of earlier Zelda titles. basically taking the old formula of top-down Zelda and adding enough new to it to create a brand new game. But ultimately, he was happy with what they accomplished, and then goes on to say, and so this game made me realize that there's still a lot of possibility for these top-down Zelda games as well. And it's all kind of broken up in little quotes because they're kind of like, I'm reading the BBC article and they're kind of paraphrasing and taking little bits here and there. But he says, and so we will also have those dynamic 3D Zeldas as well. But in addition to that, we're also hoping that we can continue with these 2D top-down Zeldas. Now, I mean, you know, I'll say again, it's been a long time since we've gotten a top-down Zelda, and that was frustrating because for such a long time, when Nintendo had their home console handheld, you know, the two pillars of their company, it felt like they were always developing one or the other at any given time. They were always working on the next 3D Zelda over here, the next 2D Zelda over here. In the same way that while they were making the Metroid Prime games over here, they were doing 2D Metroids over here. And, you know, at the time, that felt like a perfect system. It was absolutely perfect because both kinds of games, both formulas of games, they are valid and they are great and they each have their own fans. 3D Zelda and 2D Zelda, they are similar but different experiences with their own strengths. So like, it was frustrating, you know, going into the Switch generation and seeing that they just kind of weren't doing that anymore. They just kind of weren't. I couldn't understand it, especially because like 2D Zeldas have always sold pretty darn well. And I'm sure they cost a fraction, a teeny weeny tiny fraction of the money as full-blown 3D titles. You can produce them so cheaply and you can get them out so much faster that it's like, why would you not? Why would you not? So it's frustrating that they haven't been doing that all this time. We haven't been getting new 2D Zeldas regularly, especially because, you know, as I've said a million billion times, not everybody is happy with the direction that 3D Zelda has taken. So like, okay, well then give people who like the more linear, tightly designed 2D Zeldas, just give them the 2D Zeldas in the meantime. There's no reason not to. But even if it's frustrating that it took this long, this sounds like, essentially, they want to get back into it again. They want to get back into that system. And so we will also have those dynamic 3D Zeldas as well. We're also hoping that we can continue with these 2D top-down Zeldas. It sounds like Aonuma has kind of rediscovered his love for the top-down formula. And that's exciting. We had to wait so long for this one, but we might not have to wait that long for the next one. It sounds like, I mean, you know, they don't like to make long-term plans. They do whatever they want to do in the moment. They could do one more and just be like, oops, I'm out of ideas again, because, you know, it's that very frustrating thing where they think each one has to have some really enormous, huge new idea that just like completely changes everything, and it's not true. Like, you know, give us enough new just so that you could say it's a new one, but like it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. They just don't need to. Sometimes just making a new one with modern graphics and stuff, like sometimes that's enough. But then, you know, and you have like Link Between Worlds, just turning into a painting and sliding around the wall. Like, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. There's no shortage of ideas for Zelda. I could think of a bunch off the top of my head right now. Plenty of us could. It doesn't take a lot. We just want it to be new. Throw in some new stuff, and that's fine. But I suppose that is kind of what leads us now to the part where I'm kind of like cautiously optimistic about this. Echoes of Wisdom really did try to reinvent the wheel. It was very new. It was very different. It was kind of an experiment, and I think ultimately, for me at least, I mean, obviously, if most people like it, then most people like it, and that's that. But for me, it didn't land all the way. I don't think that the echo mechanic ever really quite proved itself. And if they're gonna move forward with top-down Zelda, I don't want them to all be like this. I don't want them to have to adhere to this new design philosophy where all of these problems have a million different ways of solving them, like with, you know, Tears of the Kingdom. I don't think that's right for Zelda. That dramatically lessened my enjoyment of both of those games. You know, I'm currently kind of a little bit worried about the future of Zelda, because if the future of Zelda is just open-ended puzzles, then I'm just not gonna enjoy Zelda that much anymore. I'll play them and I'll enjoy them to a degree, but there's this frustration I'm feeling right now. So like if you look at Echoes of Wisdom as kind of an experiment, then that's fine. But if moving forward they still have this idea that every new idea, I mean, it seems he must have ideas. If he is now like, oh yeah, you know what, I realized there's lots we could do with top-down Zelda. I have to imagine that means he's got ideas already. He has to. Otherwise, he wouldn't be thinking that, right? I don't want all of those ideas to have to include open-ended puzzles or really, really big, dramatic changes to how the formula works. Because there is still value in the way that top-down Zelda used to be. The more linear stuff, the more finely crafted stuff, like the real like item-based progression where you just gain items, and I mean, it worked for so long, and I truly believe that it still works, and that's why people still love and still play constantly all of those old games. And so that's why right now, yeah, cautiously optimistic. I am a little bit, okay, like sometimes when you're presenting two different ways that you feel about a thing, end on the positive one. If you want if you want the video to have a more positive tone, yes, I am a little bit worried about the future of Zelda. I'm a little bit worried about what he might be taking from these games and these experiences. If Echoes of Wisdom is laying the foundation for a future of top-down Zeldas, yeah, it's a little worrisome. But I still think it is very, very exciting that he's into them again. Because top-down Zelda is so good. Oh my goodness. It's so much fun. It's so good. So many of those games are just so infinitely replayable. They're so enjoyable. Minish Cap, one of my favorite games ever. And I love the idea that Aonuma is just feeling good about top-down Zelda again, and that we might not have to wait 12 years or whatever for the next one. I mean, he's a hard-working guy, and obviously the 3D games are very big, very, very big projects, and so I'm sure it's hard to juggle two projects like that. But as we can tell, like, you know, Grezzo handled a lot of the development, so he kind of like oversaw it. I do think we had a few problems because of that. Not going to launch into all of that right now. I think they are experiencing some growing pains, but I still like that idea. You know, I still like the idea of like taking the head talent and having them oversee a project that is actually being developed by a different studio, you know, different directors and whatnot. It's an efficient way to do things. You're developing multiple titles at once that are gonna appeal to different people. Yes, do that. That is exciting. Like, I mean, I don't know. We could genuinely see a new top-down Zelda just a few years from now, maybe even a few years into the life of the Switch 2. If they, I mean, you know, they kind of laid the foundation with Link's Awakening, and then they built upon it with Echoes of Wisdom, and now if they just keep doing that, and we keep getting 2D Zeldas, then just, who even knows?